Welcome to the show, Brain Health Unchaining Your Pain. And I am really honoured and excited to have Dr. Philip Alexander on the show today. Welcome to the show, Dr. Philip.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on your show. I've watched a lot of them and I've really got a lot out of them. Thank you.
Oh, no, you're most welcome. So for those that don't know Dr. Philip, he is a phenomenal children's doctor, and he's got some fantastic reviews from Children's Hospital from both his patients, carers, and also the staff working there. And he is clearly one that is able to serve his patients with compassion and empathy, and really care for them in an extraordinary way that serves them as a patient. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your story that made you into the phenomenon that you are today as a doctor, and I'm excited to talk to you and learn more.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's some powerful introduction, but it hasn't been without plain sailing or without its problems. In that I became mentally unwell in 2013-14, and probably had been paddling under the water for a number of years in medicine because, as you say, that characteristic of empathy and compassion, if you don't look after yourself, you can burn out quite easily.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that, and just kept doing the job or the interaction with parents and children that I felt that I needed to give, as though it was a member of my own family. And it just meant that quite a lot of the emotions, the frustrations, I took on board as well, and felt all of those emotions. And it can be difficult if you don't look after yourself. So just with how busy the job was, I had sort of neglected myself a little bit for quite a number of years, and therefore ended up unwell. And it probably goes back to some adverse experiences in childhood as well, that sort of I hadn't really dealt with, and I hadn't really healed from that, or even accepted that those things happened, and they were detrimental in any way. So I'd pushed them to one side to study away for medical school and beyond. And unfortunately, when you do that, it sort of raises itself and rears when you're older. And it did that for me at approaching the age of 40 in 2014. And because it got to that stage, I had been out of work for a long period of time, from 2014 to this year, and I'm only really starting to reintegrate back into the pediatric workplace. But I am glad that it happened in that way, even though it was quite distressing and it was quite a long time. But by doing it in that way, I have gained quite a lot of other experiences, other passions and other drives that I would like to move forward by continuing with some sessions in pediatrics, but also to balance that out and to perform some sessions in the well-being of healthcare staff, and create a role within the NHS that I can, through lived experience and knowing all the sources and resources and signposting that is out there, that I can help other members of staff feel less stigmatized and be able to talk about their mental health, their mental difficulties openly, because we know that a lot of the surveys behind the scenes that are anonymous will tell us that up to 70-75% of doctors have some form of difficulty, but they don't all disclose it. And the problem with that is that it can be under the surface for a long period of time, and then the risk is that it rears itself when you least expect it. So I hope to move forward with that.
And that's I think it's so important to have people like yourself who have been through that darkness and come out the other side, and can share their journey and share their story of recovery and hope and healing, to know that it's okay to not be okay. And it's really important to talk about it early, because like a trauma, when the seed takes root, the longer you leave it, the stronger the roots become, and the larger the tree, and it becomes harder later on, much like breaking a leg. If you don't address it early and don't apply treatment early, it's a longer journey of recovery, but by burying it. And actually we know from scientific research that buried trauma can be very detrimental to us over the long term in terms of chronic illnesses as well. And I know we met from a mental health awareness, mental health first aid course, which was just brilliant to meet you there, because we were both, learning what it means from a first aider perspective, having both ourselves had adverse experiences from our past, myself also some childhood experiences, and then on into my adulthood in terms of trauma then. So it was great for you to be able to share some of your journey there, and I'm really pleased that you've been able to do it in a way that is now going to help other people feel empowered to share, and to really, this show is about helping break the stigma and helping raise the conversations, those difficult conversations that people really struggle to talk about. I know it's okay to talk about it, and it's really important to talk about it as well, and to find that safe person that you can have that conversation with and be vulnerable and know that it's okay to do that.
Yes, so thank you. I mean, I've been having a lot of passion for these courses, and that may be one of the good things that has come out of lockdowns and pandemic, is that we've got an awful lot more used to these conversations and training courses over the internet and over Zoom. We've got over that initial awkwardness or slight satellite delay that we feel. We've got over that. We've been able to get on to these courses and collaborate with others and speak to others and hear others' experiences. And it's been invaluable to me, actually. I've been on quite a lot where we've been in small groups discussing things, and then taking that forward and presenting it to the group, and it really, really has benefited me enormously. I also would like to, within the medical culture, it's maybe an extra layer of stigma, feeling that you might be seen as weaker, or that not as competitive. There's a competitive streak run through medicine, even though we're told there aren't enough doctors and we need this, we need more staff. There still is that competitive streak in there for some reason, and sometimes certain personalities can fall to the wayside through the journey. But I just would like to make sure that those personalities and individuals have an awful lot to contribute, and usually it's in the realm of being a good listener, being empathetic, and that is very important to the patients. So those people shouldn't fall by the wayside as they go along, and we should encourage open and honest conversations about mental health within the culture, just to normalize it, and accept that most doctors will have some form of and so we would be more concerned if someone didn't come forward at some stage and say, look, I'm having difficulty with this. And it should be baked into medical training that we do talk about these things openly. There are a few charities since 2018 that have arisen that I have really been very impressed by. There is the charity that I had been involved with called UK Doc, and they run a peer support group every Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. for doctors and medical students throughout the UK to come on and talk about anything that's bothering them, really. And we've got quite a range of people on there. Some have had mental health struggles, some have had problems with stigma within the profession, and we just talk and let each other know that that experience is quite common, and they're not some standout abnormal experience that they're having, and that other people go through it too, and we can help each other. So that weekly peer support group is excellent, and it is going from strength to strength. I see that some hospitals have now baked it into their training program, peer support. And Doctors in Distress, although it is another charity since 2018, set up by a pharmacist in response to the death of his brother through suicide. Who was a medical professional, consultant cardiologist, and they didn't really have any warning because he didn't talk about anything to do with that, and all of a sudden this happens. So his pharmacist brother just wanted, what can we do to change the culture within the medical profession that people will speak more openly and honestly about their mental health. They also have branched out to help to create peer support groups for nurses, for paramedics, for people with COVID that have had the shield, for those health professionals that have experienced long COVID and difficulties with that. So there's quite a lot of specific peer support groups that Doctors in Distress have provided that are on the rise. So I'm very hopeful for the future of peer support. Now, the culture may take a longer time to change, but as long as we keep talking openly and honestly and connecting with others, I am very hopeful for the future and inspired really to continue along the well-being route.
Yeah, and I'm shocked. I am, honestly very shocked by the statistic that you just quoted of 75% experience a mental health struggle or are experiencing one, which just demonstrates, the statistics are out that being normal is, feeling normal is not normal, normal, and so it's okay to talk about your struggles, because pretty much everyone around you, 3 out of 4 people around you, are going to be experiencing it themselves. And so the more they can open up that dialogue and conversation, the more you can work as a collective group to help, take the pressure off and look at ways in which everybody can support each other. And I think that's really important and really powerful. But the key here is to create that safe haven where people can have those safe conversations without it, being detrimental to their career progression, especially if there's a competitive streak out there where mental health becomes a mark against you. As it were, to progress. And I'm not saying it does, but if there's that perception, then it's important that that's really eradicated. And I'm massively fascinated by this topic, because I myself have experienced mental health struggles and had suicidal thoughts back in 2016, and fortunately was able to see the way out through high performance coaching and subsequently brain health coaching. And I think what I find really important, and the reason we talk about it from a brain health perspective, is that everybody has a brain. Mental health is a subset of brain health. Everyone has a brain, and we can talk about the organ rather than ourselves. And so it's easier to create that separation between the struggles and the issues you're having and it being a label on you, which is why we try and talk about brain health. And so, brain health, that there's a whole spectrum in terms of what brain health is for people, into being in a struggling space, having a mental health issue, all the way through to having a high performing brain. What would you say for yourself personally? What does optimal brain health mean for you personally?
Well, it's been a bit of a discovery for me over the last few years, really, and I may have been able in the past to advise others on keeping themselves healthy. And to have a healthy brain, you need to have good sleep regulation. You need to have improve your nutrition and your diet. You need to get outside in nature and exposure to sunlight, and movement and exercise to incorporate into your day. And it would have been a connection with others as well, and a sense of purpose or some form of giving back to others also was very important in that whole well-being sense and keeping your brain healthy. So it is very difficult then for doctors seem to be able to give others advice, but very difficult for them to accept themselves and push it to one side, because they're so busy or so busy being a perfectionist in trying to deliver something for their patients that they just forget about themselves a lot. And we just try to change that. So I would say that the brain health is a combination of addressing any past traumas, and making sure that if you need medical help, that you don't feel stigmatized or shut off to seeking medical help or the appropriate treatment, be that hopefully a short course of medication along with talking therapy, but also the promotion of your sleep, your nutrition, getting outside, movement and exercise, connecting with others, and learning something new, sense of purpose, and giving back to others.
And I think that's so important, and I really love the way that you encompassed everything there that allows us to optimize our brain health from a nutrition and exercise, a sleep. For me, sleep is the most important of all, because if we don't sleep, our brain doesn't clean itself at night, doesn't clear itself of the toxins that build up during the day, and it means that we are much less have much less performance from a brain function perspective than we would do if we have optimal sleep. And as you said, nutrition, exercise, connecting with nature, connecting with others. And also, I think what was really key is the fact that you mentioned dealing with past trauma, because a lot of people don't deal with it, or the way they do deal with it from a self-medication perspective is to numb it.
Yeah.
And that numbing of it often can take place in the form of can lead to addiction, so alcohol or drug addiction. For me, I used to numb it with alcohol. Fortunately, I didn't get into an addictive state, but often people can focus on the trying to pretend it isn't there, and actually that can be the worst thing that's often the worst thing to do, because it leaks out because your body says no, as Dr. Gabor Mate, his wonderful book is, When the Body Says No, is that you have to address that emotional trauma from your past, because like emotions are like a signal, and if you don't listen to it, your brain cranks the signal up and makes it louder and louder and louder and louder until eventually you can't ignore it. And it would have been just much better if you'd listened to that signal at the outset and taken action that is constructive rather than destructive, to help yourself get better and to let go of that pain and unchain your pain.
There's an awful lot of great information in there, and I would just like to come back on this sleep is very important, and it was important to me because at one stage I was staying up quite late in the evening or at nighttime throughout the early hours of the morning, and not getting up and sleeping during the day and having no motivation to move forward, and then the cycle would repeat again.
Yeah.
It turned out that when I addressed some of those things and really mentioned how my sleep was making me feel, I had some investigations, and it turned out I had some sleep apnea. And was put on treatment for that, the CPAP at nighttime, and really it just improved my energy, my focus, my concentration. So sleep is probably the most important thing that I needed to get sorted out first. But there was a stage when I was just so numb that I just had avoided everything, had withdrawn, isolated myself, wasn't seeking help, wasn't addressing anything, and it can be very difficult for you if you just suddenly read something that says, "Oh, you need to be doing this. You need to be getting outside, exercise." When there is no way you're probably going to go even through the front door. So it's all about the small steps, really.
Absolutely, it's just getting out of bed is often a huge success when you're in a very dark place. As I found, is it was great to not have migraines and to be able to wake up and actually stand up and not want to sleep all day.
But celebrating those small victories is good, and not being hard on yourself for not being out running 5K when there's no way you can walk up the stairs without getting short of breath. There's nothing wrong with your lungs, but for some reason in a depressive illness that I've realized now, that you can be out of breath tying your shoelaces for everything just seems overwhelming to do. So that's the point that I was at. But the only way that I got out of that was to slowly take small steps forward and concentrate on getting this small identifiable task done, and then moving forward and doing a bit more than I did yesterday. That was the only way that I got out of that cycle. It took a while, but as I say, I'm glad that I came through that, because I've learned an awful lot more than I would have, and heard an awful lot more perspectives than the insular medical world that we live in and educate ourselves in.
Yeah, and I just would like to celebrate your accomplishments, because coming out of a depressive state is like climbing Everest sometimes, and you can't just pretend that you're going to get to the top without doing the work to get just even to base camp. And then taking that really slow methodical plod forward, and I often like to say, if you struggle to comprehend how far you've got to go, acknowledge how far you've come, take one step forward and just keep going. And that's often what it's like, isn't it, when we're in that dark place, is we know there's light at the end of the tunnel. It might feel like it's an incredibly long way away, but if we just keep walking forward, we'll get out. But the great thing about the tunnel is lots of people have been through it before, and they've got a torch because they know the way. So if you ask for help at the beginning of the tunnel, if you can't walk because it's too difficult, because you can't breathe, someone's there to carry you. Someone's there with a wheelchair. Someone is there with whatever you need to help you through it in the best way possible for you. And that's why I think it is such an important thing that we create the right space for people to ask for help and have these forums. So for me, myself, we run weekly trauma recovery group coaching every Monday and Friday, Monday at 8 p.m, Friday at 9 a.m, for people who actually can't talk about their trauma because it's too painful, so that they can experience the release of it, let go of it, and get themselves into a position where they can start to have those talk conversations about it. Because sometimes, especially for huge trauma, where there is shame associated with it, or where there is confidentiality associated with it, people don't like to talk about it, and actually talking about it can sometimes, for some people, be more traumatizing in its own right. And that's why it's important that we offer a range of therapies that suits the person, rather than trying to fit the person to the therapy. And taking a really patient-centric or client-centric approach is really important.
Absolutely. There's definitely is no one size fits all, and I can't take my experience and journey and say this is what worked for me, you need to do this. That's not the way I wish to advise people at all. When I started to make a little bit of progress, I sort of supercharged my recovery by writing my thoughts down, journaling through the day, and putting these random thoughts down. And at a certain stage, I said, I would like to organize these thoughts into something that would be useful. I was speaking to my daughter. She's 19 now, and she advised me to, if I was amenable to put some of the information on social media, and I wasn't a social media person. She set me up an Instagram account. She said, no, don't use Facebook or Twitter. They're not. She said that the Instagram was a better way of doing short, sort of informative pieces, and she was right. And by doing that and setting that up for me, I got to connect with all of these other people that were there to help. I've connected with lifestyle medicine doctors. I've connected with both of those charities and Frontline 19 charity as well, that provide counselling to frontline healthcare workers. And I wouldn't have found out about those unless I had been on Instagram just putting my little pieces on there. And I don't want to give out any prescriptive advice to anyone on there, so I just will describe my experience and what others find useful at certain stages, but not to be too hard on yourself and find your own path through that. It's interesting you say about some of those support groups. I really believe in the peer support. I'll be attending another one today, which is through the Aware NI, a mental health charity for anxiety, depression, and bipolar, and it's very useful. They do a peer support group every week, and on a Wednesday and or a Tuesday and a Wednesday. So I'll be attending the one today, and the huddle then tomorrow night. There was also one that I've attended on a Monday night, which is for men to have the space to be able to feel that they can express themselves. It's a Human.org. They do a men's peer support group on a Monday evening, and it's very useful. There's more people at that, maybe 25 to 30, so it's a bit more organized, and you have to raise your hand in order to share. And then they talk about a topic or a theme such as growth or trauma, or there'll be a theme for the week that we all discuss if we wish to do that. The actor Andrew Scott supports that charity, and he was on a video, and as you said earlier, he said it would be ridiculous for anyone to say, for me to say, I've gone through my life and I have never had anything physically wrong with me, no physical health problems at all. So we would look at someone and say that's ridiculous, that's unbelievable. So he says in the same sense, we have all had mental health issues or difficulties along the way, and there should be parity then, and we should not stigmatize and say that I've gone through my life without any mental health difficulties. That should sort of raise red flags, really.
Yeah, and I think, the trouble is, because we label ourselves as I've got the issue rather than actually talk about the organ that's in trouble, we'd never go to the heart surgeon with a heart condition and say I've got a beats per minute issue. When I take my daughter to, when she had a potential heart murmur, I took her to the pediatrician and cardiologist. She went to see a cardiologist, and we talked about heart, and it was a really easy, simple conversation. There was no labeling of her. We talked about the organ, and she could envisage where it is in her body and what could be in trouble. And we looked at the organ that was to check that it was okay, made sure that it was functioning, much like you would do with an X-ray on a broken leg. We got an all clear, thankfully, but it could have been different. And the conversation, went around her heart potentially having a problem. There was no labeling of her that you've got a problem, Lily. It's your issue to deal with. But for reasons of the way that the language has evolved from a mental health perspective, we label ourselves as having the issue rather than talking about our brain being in trouble, which is in essence what it is. And because our brain is connected to the rest of our body, if we don't feed our brain right, and we talked about nutrition is incredibly important, over 80% of our neurotransmitters are made in our gut. So if our gut health isn't right, our brain health isn't right. And, one of the first things that we often focus on when we talk to people about brain health is making sure that you've optimized your nutrition for your brain, because everybody's brain is different, and that you've removed the aspects of your nutrition that could be hurting you rather than helping you, and not allowing you to make the neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, with serotonin being so important as our happiness chemical and dopamine as motivation, and they're all really important in how our brain functions. And it's, we forget about that often. When we label ourselves as being the issue, we need to look at the system that we are affected by, to understand what the root cause of the issue is, rather than the person having the problem.
Yes, I mean, it's difficult for humans in general, and especially medical practitioners as well, to see the brain as this separate organ like the heart, because it's so tied up with who we are, and the way we behave, that and we know so little about a lot of things. But we're getting there. We can see through fMRI scans, we can see the different areas of the brain that aren't functioning properly or overactive in anxiety, such as the amygdala. And we're getting a little bit more knowledge, which is really good. And we are evolving. But it is difficult to separate and just say we've got a brain difficulty with our brain. We do find that difficult, but hopefully as we move forward, because it is a very useful tool to sort of say that it's not, I haven't got a personality problem, I haven't got an issue that I'm that I'm weaker than others. I just have an issue with the pathways and wiring in my brain that hopefully through raising my serotonin for a short period of time, creating new pathways and doing the right things, that those pathways will rewire, and I can be improved moving forward and help myself. There's a lot of myths as well about medications, that they dull your personality, or they but hopefully you only need them for a short period of time in order to make new pathways in the brain, and it's really down to doing the other things that makes you better.
Yeah, and I think I really want to pick on that point, because that's so key, is that medication is a short-term solution to get you over the hump. And it's only a short-term solution for some people. It's not applicable for everybody. And I know, my mother, it didn't work for my mother. And we used brain health coaching as an alternative and havening to really help us. It's got to be the right initial intervention that is right for the patient, based on their brain, how their brain works as well, because actually that's really important to understand, is how their brain is actually functioning at the time, and any other conditions that are relevant. And then the deep work to the true recovery has to be done by you yourself. You have to do the deep work on your sleep, on your nutrition, on your exercise, on your gratitude journaling, on killing the ants, the automatic negative thoughts, those thoughts that we keep telling ourselves, where we depreciate, self-deprivation, and belittle ourselves. Often we're our own worst enemy from a thought perspective. And that has a huge influence on our emotions. It's like someone, we cut ourselves 1,000 times versus the individual that may have cut you in the first place, because we keep playing it over and over again. We actually do ourselves more harm than sometimes, not all the time, obviously, the person that's hurt us in the first place, because of that playback that we have going on in our mind.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I totally agree. And as medical professionals as well, we're quite anti-medication for ourselves, and we don't. We're often closed off to seeking help, because we feel, oh, I'll just go to the doctor. He'll prescribe me this. This won't work. That won't work. And you already have mapped out how everything's going to plan out, and that it's not going to work before you even ask for help. So that's the way the overthinking brain will work. But it's interesting you say about the treatments and procedures that you're involved in. There's a facility near me called a HydroEase, where they do flotation in a sort of limited sensory environment, and they also do group work and havening, as you say. And I've been for the flotation in the tank and found it very useful. It's very difficult initially in the blackness to be at ease with your own self and your own mind, but I've gotten used to it now, and it's built up my stamina as well. It's just one of the other things that just helps me to be happy with being alone with myself, just to sort of float for an hour in darkness. It's not like the old sensory deprivation. It's sort of fully open. It's just and you can keep small lights on if you wish, but to be in the darkness is actually more beneficial, and floating in the small shin deep water with half a ton of salt in it is the magnesium salts is it's very beneficial and for the body and mind. And yeah, and she was the lady that sent me the links to attend some of Dr. Mate's talks live as well. She arranged that, so there's a bit of a link there.
Yeah, and I mean, Dr. Gabor Mate has done some phenomenal work in helping people heal from trauma and drug addicts, and that often it goes back to adverse childhood experiences is the root cause of the behavioural issues. And I'd love to dive into that, if you will, if you wouldn't mind. Sharing your journey as to what led you to realise that your empathy or your empathic nature was becoming overwhelming for you at the time, and that triggered you into a state of depression.
Yes, well, I mean, when I was younger, my childhood was a bit unstable in that I lived with my grandparents and mother for the first few years of my life, and then and then my mum met someone else who then I believed was my father for a lot of years, until she told me that that wasn't the case, and that sort of struck me at a young age quite difficult. It was quite a difficult experience and difficult to get your head around as a child, and also that the relationship with my mum and stepdad was very, very turbulent, and there was some alcohol involved and things like that. And I had 4 other very younger siblings that I basically became a child carer for at times.
Wow.
But I thought this was all normal, and my coping strategies then were to go into my own mind and thoughts, and to think about how I would wish to be treated, and how I would realize what someone else was going through. How did I do that? So I sort of began to feel that empathic feeling and nature. But I think I realized early on that it can overwhelm you, but for some reason I put that to one side and didn't address it. And just to get out of the environment, I just studied hard and just moved out of home when I was quite young, 16, 17, and did my A levels from a shared, it was quite student house that was,
Wow.
So it was a difficult process, but I felt that this was going to fix me, the studying and the getting away. But then when I got into medicine, realized how competitive it was, and how probably a lot of the people around me had come from a more settled middle class type background, and I just felt out of place with this imposter syndrome, as they might describe it, but imposter feelings. And that stayed with me and always caused me difficulty. And I didn't ever address any of my mental health struggles. There was nothing baked into training back then where it was mentioned, or there was someone to go for help. Now in medical training, the medical training deaneries or boards have specialized well-being classes and talks and things like that. It's not enough, but it is improving. As to when I graduated in 1998. So in the 90s, there was nothing. We didn't mention
phenomenal,
well-being
really,
at all.
to consider that your medical degree, which covers the whole body and mind, has nothing to train you in terms of supporting the mind.
Yes, and supporting your own well-being, protecting yourself, and topping yourself up from. It seems to be that you've either got it or you haven't. Is sort of the attitude. You can either deal with it or you can't. But I sort of realized that wasn't really true, because I had seen people that started off quite nice individuals that would interact with patients very well, and the way they coped then was to develop a sense of cynicism or hardness to themselves, and not to go to their boundaries were so put up that they wouldn't allow patients past a certain point. And to that patient, they would have felt quite detached and superior, which I knew I didn't want to be. So it took me a while to sort of be able to top myself up and be able to look after myself, but without losing the personality that I wish to present to patients.
That must have been incredibly hard. How young were you at the time that the trauma started? Was it literally from birth?
3 years old.
Wow.
I had a great life, albeit with my. It was in an abnormal, or people might say that living with your grandparents and your mum out at work would be, and it's not most 1 to 3 year olds experience. But there are quite a lot of different families out there. But I was quite happy and settled, and my grandparents showed me a lot of love, maybe overindulged me a little bit. So then when I was taken away from that environment at 3 years old, into what I seen was a very strict environment with a lot of shouting and screaming, it was difficult for me to process that.
And that took you away from that place of safety. Children need that emotional security, that emotional safety net to know that the adult, the carer, is a safe person to go to emotionally regulate themselves. And when that's taken away from them, it's incredibly difficult because you've got no emotional regulation offering anymore, other than what you may get further down the line, which is at school.
Yes, and my coping mechanisms was to avoid any situations where confrontation or terse behavior, or even asserting yourself felt to me felt abnormal, felt that I shouldn't be asserting myself, that I should be.
You became hypersensitive.
Yes, a very hyper-reactive type person. But that has been shown that those increased reactivity children do have a greater sense of listening and empathy later on in life. But it has to be metered and topped up at the other end by some self-care.
And obviously you used, I can relate to the education pieces. You buried yourself in your mind and used study as your therapy to escape, in essence. And obviously that escape mechanism from the fear that you were experiencing then became a fear factor in its own right, because you developed imposter syndrome.
Yes, I mean, it just shows that those maladaptive coping mechanisms might work for a short period of time, but you will always hit the wall unless you address the underlying issues in a proper way with others to talk about. The best way for me is to move forward with. I have a good relationship with my mum and stepdad now. We've talked it through, and I'm not at a point of any resentment or feeling that I want to blame my parents in any way. I'm 47 years old now. Of course, I'm responsible for my own reactions to things, and if I have maladaptive coping mechanisms now, I have to address those myself, rather than, because you just stay in a cycle of blaming, and it doesn't really move you forward at all.
No, you get stuck, don't you? It's like a broken record that it just gets stuck and you can't move on with the next song.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
You're stuck in the record groove.
For those that know records, although they'll come back now, thankfully. So when did you notice that you were experiencing this struggle emotionally, that you hadn't dealt with this past trauma? When did that come into your conscious awareness?
I think through medical school, I realized that I'm probably not coping or behaving in the same way as some of these guys that again, a lot of, in the 90s, a lot of the social aspects of medical school were based in alcohol as well. There weren't any other
I used to go out with a doctor, so I know exactly what you're talking about around the same time as well.
And that was your only social, and I, as quite a shy introverted person, I didn't like to go out into these crowded environments, and I couldn't strike up conversations with strangers easily, or even maintain conversations with people I knew in these loud, crowded environments. And I knew that it wasn't that I wasn't as social as everyone else, and I at that stage I thought, yes, it's because, you know, the way I've dealt with my childhood, but it'll settle. But it never did. I mean, I'm very good at communicating with patients and parents, but I still found it very difficult to interact with the politics of medicine, and found that very difficult. So it was always a stress. Every day was a stress for me to go into work, and to some of the confrontation that you had to, some of the old school methods of teaching by humiliation or things like that, I found very difficult. And
I found that too. You know, I can wholly relate to your experiences that I found confrontation really hard in any way, and I still struggle with socializing with people, and I think it's because we have this, we don't feel safe, because that safety piece was taken away from us when we were young. And so the people that you think is that trust piece, isn't it? The trusting that someone is going to support you and going to empathize with you and understand you and help you. And when that isn't there, it becomes our kind of default, well, I can't trust anyone. And so, you know, we go inside our mind because that's our only space of safety. And so everything else outside of it becomes a perceived threat.
And then that inner world becomes dangerous in itself, in that
absolutely.
It's the overthinking. You think by thinking for things for a long period of time, you might come up with some solution that's wonderful. But those introverted thinking loops, and relying on intuition all the time, that radar can go off, and that's when you become quite unwell, and being hard on yourself and imagining all the different scenarios that could occur before you've even tried to approach the situation. So being inside your own mind, it can become dangerous as well.
Absolutely. And when was your actual, obviously you went through, you know, in the 98, you were going through medical school, and then you became a doctor, and you were a pediatrician training.
Yes.
And then
I was in the training to become a consultant pediatrician, but I was having difficulty within that, as I've described, and so I stepped out of training and became what's called a specialty doctor, or used to be called a staff associate specialist doctor, which is it's a permanent middle grade type doctor in a specialty, and that was suitable for me at that time, and I was happy for quite a long period of time, although, as I say, I was probably paddling underneath the surface and not addressing some of the things. So it did come to a head then in 2013, 2014.
And what was the big head that it came to, if you're happy to share? Obviously, you don't have to.
It gets to a stage where when you're within a depression, that your performance starts to fall off. So, and then I started to.
So it was kind of gradual.
Yeah. So I started to believe that this is my fault. This is just because I'm not performing well. There's nothing else involved. I'm just a bad person. I'm just a bad doctor, and all of those self-deprecation, as you say, just kept playing over in my mind, and I just came to crisis, and was diagnosed with major depression and had to leave work at that stage.
Wow.
Although I remained employed over those years, but it's been a long road to try and get back into work.
Wow. And you said you just recently come back into work.
Well, I'm starting a program of reintroduction and phased return as such, and just being just slower, and also nurturing those other passions at the side has given me something that I can call my own, and to feel a sense of purpose within, that's separate to the just performing the pediatric service tasks that a specialty doctor would do. That's one of the things that specialty doctors feel quite straining, is that they just perform the service tasks, and they don't seem to have any ownership of their job. So that sideline of well-being now has become essential to keep me balanced and allow me to perform the service tasks for pediatrics, which I wouldn't give up because I have 20 years experience in pediatrics, and I know that I had a lot to give there. As you said, some of the reviews from patients did. It was nice of you to say that. I hadn't seen those until you mentioned them last week, and I went back into that site and read those reviews, and it actually gave me a little boost and a little confidence that I'm not finished with pediatrics. I shouldn't go in another direction completely, but I should balance that out with some other passion as well. And we can all have our career doesn't have to be a straight path, and it doesn't have to be prescribed as in medicine. It's just like you train, you do this, you become a consultant at this time. If you don't do this at this time, then you're not performing. It's all very rigid, but it's probably within our own minds. And if we really step back and said, no, well, I would like to do this in a slower pace, and I would like to do something else, and I would like to have a mismatch or a portfolio of jobs that I do within my career, then we would probably find that it is doable.
I think that's wonderful, and the reviews that I've read online are absolutely phenomenal, and you can tell that you have approached your profession as an empath because of the way the reviews are written, and often being an empath is very difficult because you absorb other people's emotions. You don't have an emotional barrier. And what ends up happening because of your past experiences, you can't turn that absorption off. So you're taking on everyone else's emotions because you haven't been able to create the barrier, at a young age to know this is my emotion and that's yours. And that's when it can become overwhelming, is you just become an emotional magnet, and it just depletes your energy reserve because you just topped yourself up with everyone else's emotions that are not necessarily constructive for you, and the emotional lid blows. And that sounds like possibly what's happened is through your service, you just were absorbing, doing your best to serve people with it, with a phenomenal empathic approach, but there was no barrier for you.
And the lead up to me going off or becoming very unwell as well, there were difficulties in that there was a bad run of serious cases of children that unfortunately didn't make it. It seemed to be one after the other. It seemed to just pushed me over the edge a little bit, and because my performance was falling off slightly, I was having difficult relationships with colleagues, and there was very little support within the medical profession. And I felt I can't disclose all of this because it just made it all worse. I made it all worse for me in that. So the stigma, the self-stigmatization, and all of those things just all combined, and I had to I burnt out basically. So but I'm glad,
and that's completely understandable, because our surroundings have a huge impact, and we don't acknowledge the impact our surroundings have on ourselves. It's not just about how our brain's wired, it's about how our brain gets wired as a result of our surroundings in our childhood, and also within our workplace, because our brain's constantly evolving and adapting. And if we're experiencing a destructive culture that isn't serving us, then our brain starts to shut down, because it and rewire, it can shut down, also rewire itself and become hypervigilant again. And that doesn't serve us either.
No, it can make the situation worse, which I'm glad that I have that experience, because I've seen in some of the peer support groups that some of the younger doctors are going through exactly the same that I went through, and I can see the steps that they're taking that will make the situation worse over time. And I'm able to give them my experience and say, you need to step back, you need to talk about your experiences, and you don't have to go along a certain trajectory. You're not a failure if you do something else, or take a step back, or do something a little slower. You're looking after yourself so that you can be the best doctor you can be for your patients. And I've found that very useful to me, to be able to impart that advice and hopefully prevent some of the younger doctors from going down the same harmful trajectory as I did.
And I think that's really important, is care starts with self-care. And we need to remember that. And I know it's incredibly hard from the profession that you're in, is often the self-care gets put on the back burner. Because the care of the patients becomes a priority. But obviously, if you're not looking after yourself first, it's very difficult to look after everyone else effectively.
And then there comes a point where you're not looking after your patients properly, and so it's important to realize that, and to be able to step back before you actually make the situation an awful lot worse.
And what was the big shift for you? I know we talked about the going one step at a time in your journey of recovery, and celebrating those little wins every day, because every day is a win. Waking up in the morning is a win. What was were there any big needle movers for you?
Yes. Well, I waited quite a long time, from 2014 to 2016, for CBT. And once I started the CBT, initially I wasn't opening up to the therapist the way I had been doing. I hadn't been doing.
So that's cognitive behavioural therapy.
Yes, and it's the NHS. It was on the NHS, and there was quite a long waiting time. So, 2016, I eventually got slotted in, and I luckily the therapist I got slotted in with was amazing, and he really just went at my own pace. And a lot of the times in the NHS, when you don't attend an appointment, you just get this automatic response that you will be removed from the list. But he would actually phone me up and say, "What happened today? You didn't, and he would give me that space, and then slowly but surely I trusted him more within my and I was able to open up and describe exactly how I was feeling. So he would listen, and then we would go through some of the techniques to change my coping strategies and behavior slowly. And so from 2016 to 2019, I had one of those sessions every week, which was amazing. Wow. It definitely was more benefit than attending the psychiatry appointments. But when he retired then in 2019, he said, "I think you're okay now. You've got the tools." I did feel that I would fall off a cliff, but I didn't. I did. He was right. I did have the tools. And from 2019 onwards, I've sort of been able to build on that, and sort of the recovery has taken off from then.
And I think that's really important for people to recognise, is that recovery can take a long time. And it's just to honour the struggle and to honour the journey. And your journey, it sounds, has been one of deep learning and revelation in a really good way, to have the tools now that you can now share with others, your experience you can share with others to help other people see that there is a way out, and the importance of opening up to someone that they can open up to in a safe way.
Yeah, as I say to the younger doctors as well, there are very few, if any, people who will recognize that they're depressed, will go to their doctor straight away, will get the appropriate response from their doctor, will get the appropriate treatment at the right time, and will recover within X number of weeks. That doesn't happen. Everyone has a struggle and a different, and a longer. So
and the system.
There's this perfect response. It's not going to. You need to realize that you're not failed if you take it slower. If it's sort of not clean along the way. There's so bumps in the road. That's the way most of us actually experience it. But again, even the medical profession won't say this to you. You get this impression that there's this clean depression that gets resolved quite quickly.
Yeah, and it can stay with you, but it's to know that you've got those tools to manage it and to be aware of it. And our emotions, I like to think of emotions like a wave, and that waves keep coming. The waves keep coming, but it's knowing that the wave is coming. and knowing how to ride it, and whether you want to ride it, and how to surf it. And if you don't want to ride it, having the tools to dive deep underneath it to let that wave ride over you and dissipate. But what we often find is we've got no awareness that the wave is coming because we're not checking in, and then suddenly we get hit by this enormous wave of emotion, and we end up going bongo sliding, for those of you that know surfing, or basically being, thrown around in the wave as it's crashing onto the shore. And then we're very confused and discombobulated, wondering what's happened. And then suddenly another wave hits us, and another wave. And it's, knowing that we can swim out to sea.
It's very important to recognize those emotions, and so to be aware and recognize that it's okay to have a certain emotion. This is the emotion I'm feeling, and to be able to deal with that in a rational way, but not beat yourself up about having the emotion or feeling guilty that I shouldn't be feeling like this. It's just recognize it and have the tools then to manage that, which does come over time and practice, and you don't get it right every time. But being gentle on yourself is very important.
Yeah, I get curious. We say get curious, not furious with them. Every emotion is, like you say, is valid. And we can leverage negative, if you want to call them that, negative emotions, we can leverage in a positive way. Like anger is a good emotion. It fires us into action. And it's often seen as something that we shouldn't have, but embrace everything and learn how to ride them, and learn how to use them and leverage them to best effect. I
would say that the anger, again, is one that I didn't like feeling angry at all, and felt that but it's really the abnormal behavior that we don't like, that results from not processing that anger properly.
Absolutely. What do you think needs to change within the medical profession going forward? What do you say the sort of the top 3 things that need to happen, and to help people? 75% of doctors or medical personnel are struggling with a mental health issue is a phenomenal
mental health struggles rather than a mental illness.
Mental health struggle.
That was a BMA survey last year.
British Medical Association.
Yes. So that was done last year, and the Doctors in Distress as well have done a few surveys that have come up with the same figures. What I find is just the open and honest conversation within the profession, that we all do have mental health struggles. That's okay, and to expect it to happen, and to know how to support each other without pushing. We tend in medical to push someone away that's having difficulties, because as though it's infectious, as though if we get involved with this person, it's just going to take up too much of our time. We're not going to be able to care for our patients, and that's what we're here for. So we tend to push away a colleague that's having difficulties, or feel that someone else should be there to help them other than us. But just that we do support each other, and that we do talk about it openly and honestly. And as I say, the new charities that have arisen since 2018, I'm really positive about those, and they are promoting the open and honest conversations about mental health within the profession, and changing the culture slowly, realizing it is going to be slow, but we will get there. And the peer support, I think, as well, is going to be very important. And I think we should have it in every medical workplace, where there is some form of peer support group, where you're interacting with people that and you're in a safe space. You don't feel you're going to occupational health and you're being assessed and you're being evaluated in a negative way. That you're able to share your thoughts and feelings in a safe space, independent from your job or your career.
And I think that's really important. I think also, from my personal experiences, I found I didn't want to go to therapy. I wanted to get support that would. I did want cognitive behavioural therapy. Actually, that's not strictly true. That's what I wanted, but it wasn't available to me. And so I was given a positive psychologist, which actually didn't really serve me. It wasn't the right type of therapy for me, and the therapy that worked for me was not therapy at all. It was coaching, and it's to know that there is that those offerings are out there. They do exist, for people to ask for help beyond the system, if that's what they feel they need to get themselves through, because it's all about learning new skills that will help you now and later, and learning different ways to approach whatever you're struggling with, so that you can live a thriving rather than a surviving lifestyle.
I am passionate about the coaching within coaching to be an integral part of NHS as well. Culture, that a culture of coaching is normal. I'm seeing a lot of the BMA are providing coaching sessions now, so I'm very enthusiastic about that. And I've been able to connect with doctors that have become coaches on. I've connected with them on Instagram, and the little Instagram live coaching sessions, the coaching pod as well that I've been on, have really helped me as well. When I've been at a certain point, there would have been a point that I wouldn't have been unreceptive to that, but now it's improving and supercharging my recovery.
Well, that's brilliant, because this is going from mental health to, like you say, to mental wealth, and to really focusing on how you can get your brain optimized. Rather than sitting in the just being okay space, is wanting to feel extraordinary, and to be able to leverage that to serve everybody that you want to serve now, not just the children that that is your passion.
Yes, and thriving within that is absolutely key.
What one piece of advice would, because this show is all about brain health and really unchaining your pain, what one piece of advice would you give to anyone who's in the medical profession that is feeling they're getting to a dark place of depression and overwhelm? What one piece of advice would you give them?
To talk about it, and to not feel that it is a strength to do so. There are an awful lot more organizations within medical schools, and when you're a doctor, that you can have that independent discussion with someone. NHS Practitioner Health is only available in England and Scotland. We're trying to make it available in Northern Ireland, which is an independent, bespoke service where doctors can access assessment, treatment, talking therapy, and so basically talk about it with the appropriate people that are there to support you, would be my biggest advice.
I completely agree, and I think it's so important to ask for help, because when you ask for help, you're giving that gift to somebody to actually help you. It's a gift asking for help, because there are people out there, and a strength. Yes, exactly, and so a real strength.
We should see that as a strength within the medical profession, and be more worried about those who cruise through and do not ever ask for any assistance or help.
Yeah. Les Brown, who has an amazing quote, he says, "Ask for help not because you feel weak, ask for help so that you may remain strong."
Yes.
And I think that's really important, that we recognise it as, like you say, as a strength to do that.
Absolutely.
Philip, it's been just an absolute pleasure talking to you today. I know we've got the banner that's running below for those that are watching. How can people connect with you?
Well, I have the Instagram account that I post little living experience pieces, and also some of the charities that I'm involved with. So that's dr.mental.wealth on Instagram. And I would be involved with those charities. I raise funds. I do my sea swimming now. In the sea, the cold therapy helps me. So I've got some posts about sea swimming for mental health, and brain health as well, and nutrition and sleep. So it's an interesting account, and it has helped me. I didn't really expect or wish to reach anyone, but the connections that I've made on there have been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and I do encourage people to go to your account. I love your swimming escapades and the wonderful posts that you've put up there. So thank you so much for joining me on my show, Dr. Philip. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I wish you all the success in fulfilling what you are passionate about and fulfilling your purpose going forward. Thank you.
Privilege, thank you.
This broadcast is brought to you by WINJECT Studios. We are an all-in-one educational platform for podcasters that revolutionizes how hosts leverage content to increase engagement with listeners, downloads, and income. We come together to focus on community, collaboration, and collective impact. For more information on how you can interact directly with our hosts, access exclusive live content with offers you can't get anywhere else from our official partners, join our purpose-driven community by visiting www.winject.com. If you're ready to build a career doing what you love, then we're ready to see you there.